Hi, everyone. Welcome to another webinar in the Food Industry Executive Series. My name is Amanda, and we're excited to have you here with us today. I wanted to go over a couple of housekeeping items with you. To start off, first, if you have any questions, please drop them into the questions tab at the bottom of the webinar. We will also be sending out any recordings and handouts after the webinar. Steven Burton is the creator of the award-winning food production management system, Icicle. Icicle offers a complete solution for smart automation, improving quality standards, production efficiency, and expanding growth opportunities for all types of food businesses. Now with AI-enabled features, Icicle helps food and beverage manufacturers protect profitability and move their business forward into the future. Steve's background in manufacturing and consulting, combined with sophisticated software development expertise, gives him a unique perspective on today's topic. And with that, I will pass it off to Steve. Thanks, Steve.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for the introduction. Appreciate that. Yeah, I am Steve Burton, and today I'm here to talk to you about artificial intelligence and specifically its applications in the food industry. And we'll take a look at some of its inner workings. We'll shed some light on its capabilities and look at how it's used in various domains within the context of the food industry itself. So first of all, we are Icicle Technologies. So as Amanda mentioned, we touch pretty much every aspect of the food production process, all the way from product design through to hazard analysis and asset plan generation, then to receiving, production, shipping, traceability, all of that. So we have a kind of a holistic view of the industry as a whole. So that's kind of useful when it comes to figuring out where AI can be applied. One of the things that I wanted to point out before we get started here is that it's a kind of a scary concept, embracing AI, at the time that new technologies have disrupted. And in fact, many times in the past it has. So the telephone, you can see this quote here from William Orton, the president of Western Union, who said that the telephone has too many shortcomings to be seriously considered as a means of communication, which didn't work out that well. So I think AI is the same kind of category where, there's a lot of people now see that it's kind of coming down the pike, but there's still people holding out. And I think the best thing to do at this point is really not to be too afraid of it, but to figure out how best to embrace it and to use it to really help you. So first of all, I just wanted to talk a little bit about what is AI. Just as a heads up, what I'm going to try to do here is just give you a brief introduction to what AI is so that everybody who might not know gets some sense of it, and then we'll dive specifically into the food industry. AI is not really a thing. Really is just the simulation of human intelligence by machines. So it's really more of an objective or a goal as opposed to an actual specific technology. There's a lot of people are currently quite afraid of this. There's a number of reasons, some of which are more critical and significant than others. But, data privacy and security is one of the problems that people are worried about. And there's definitely something to be said for that, especially large language models that assimilate the entire internet. They could come across proprietary information that can be disclosed. So we have to guard against that kind of thing. People may become quite dependent on this technology over time and sort of abandon their own decision-making skills. I would propose to you that AI is more of a prediction engine as opposed to a decision-making technology. I wouldn't rely on it to make that. Retain your own faculties of decision-making, but I think the dependency is also a risk that people might run into. Loss of control. People fear that they may have loss of control. Usually when new tools come in, people do fear that, but ultimately it turns out that it actually allows more control. AI malfunctions and safety concerns. So what happens if the AI goes wrong? Right now, we're in a fairly early stage in AI development, so that is definitely a concern that you have to take it with a grain of salt. Or if it's a device where it's AI is running on a specific device, those devices are usually only doing one very small specific task, so that kind of mitigates the risk of malfunction. Loss of jobs to automation. This is probably the most significant issue that we're going to currently face in the next decade or two. Bias and fairness. There's a little bit of a two-edged sword to this one. So a lot of people are worried about bias in AI, and they have the notion that that AI is inherently biased. And it is true that AI is trained on data sets usually, and if those data sets were generated by humans, bias definitely could happen. There's also another kind of bias that you have to watch out for, which is if some people disagree with AI's results, and just because you disagree with it doesn't mean there's bias. So if you look at, think about, for example, Google Gemini and what happened with that. Regulatory compliance, there is going to be probably more regulatory compliance even than we have today coming in as a result of AI. Also, regulators will use AI, so it might be more difficult to kind of get around certain things that we're used to being able to get around. Integration challenges, there's going to be a lot of integration required to connect everything together if you really want to use AI effectively, and there could be unforeseen consequences, who knows what those are. So in terms of the fundamentals of AI, there's actually three types of AI, or actually forever, this will be all there are. So there's narrow AI, which is also called weak AI. And what that is it's AI that does one task very specifically. So think about Siri, think about, self-driving cars, very targeted, kind of limited, not general. And then general artificial intelligence is really the approximation of human intelligence. So once AI has capabilities that allow it to operate generally and not only in specific domains, that's going to be general artificial intelligence. And we are not there yet. Best guess is probably 25 to 50 years before we'll achieve that. So we're quite a long ways out from that. And then the big thing that a lot of people are worried about, super intelligence, that is where the AI's capacities will surpass human intelligence. And probably at least 50 years, more likely 100, and maybe never for that. But, nobody really knows for sure, but it definitely isn't tomorrow or the day after that. In terms of deployment types, there's two different ways that AI can be deployed. Things like ChatGPT-4 that probably most people are familiar with, that is a cloud AI technology. So basically, there's some sort of a query that's sent up into the cloud. The processing is done in the cloud, and then the result is passed back to you through the internet. The other type, which is also very germane to the food industry, is edge AI. And all that means is that, you have edge AI running on a local device of some kind that interacts with the outside world. So like this image here is for an acoustical sensor, for example, where, you might mount that. It might have the ability to listen for specific sounds and then react based on certain patterns if those patterns should occur. So think about when you say, hello, Google or something on your mobile phone, there's actually a chip that listens for that, and that's all it does, and that's all it can do. And so those, it's not like every conversation that you have is going up to the, your cloud provider. It's only listening for those certain words based on that chip inside. Another thing that, people might not be aware of is that there's often a big time lag between when a new technology is initially introduced and when that technology kind of goes mainstream. AI has just recently come on the radar for a lot of people. People have heard about it for a long time, but never really thought about using it themselves until quite recently. But it's actually quite an old technology already. People have been working on it aggressively since 1965, and it was 2022 when it actually hit the mainstream. So there's a very big time lag between those things. So we're already quite far down the road in terms of the development of AI itself. There's quite a few limitations of AI itself. And with ChatGPT, for example, just to have some fun, I decided to ask ChatGPT a question. What are your limitations? And what it told me is that my intelligence is different from human intelligence. I can process and analyze vast amounts of information quickly, perform complex calculations, and generate responses based on patterns in the data that I've been trained on. However, my capabilities are limited to what I've been programmed and trained to do. I don't possess consciousness, emotions, or the ability to understand context and nuance in the way that humans do. I also can't generate new ideas or experiences, learn in real time, or make judgments based on ethical considerations or common sense without explicit instructions. So that's quite a telling, long statement. I'm not going to quote lots of stuff like that for you today, but I thought that one was an interesting one. One of the main takeaways there that you should really understand is that it cannot learn in real time. So you might have heard the term, for example, machine learning, and think that, or even conversed with Chat GPT and then thought that, it's assimilating and understanding what you're saying. It's pretty good at predicting what you might want to hear, but it can't assimilate that information. If you give it feedback, it can only, the next time the entire model is trained, then it can incorporate new knowledge, but it can't do that, every time it talks to a user. So it's kind of a train it, and then it's fixed in time after that. So it's really quite a lot more limited than a lot of people might think. And in terms of limitations, here's actually a real example from our production system. So this is production data, and it's a graph of customer complaints over time. So the blue line there is representing the number of complaints that have been received from customers, on a daily basis. And the kind of orangish colored cone at the end is a cone of probability that's extrapolating into the future, and it's kind of giving you an indication of what sort of range of values you might expect to see going forward. So it's making a prediction there. And you notice that the cone, gets wider as it goes farther in the future, which makes sense because, the farther out we go, the less certainty we have. But you also notice that it drops below the zero line. So, what it's really saying is that there's a probability that there could be negative complaints, which doesn't really make sense. So this is a pretty good demonstration of how AI doesn't necessarily have common sense, right? So something to keep in mind when you're using AI. So let's go now a little bit more specifically into the food industry and talk about, why you might want to use AI in the food industry. So the main ones really are that you can achieve higher accuracy in terms of predictions. So that's a big one, and that's probably one of the main ones, is that because the systems can assimilate vast quantities of information, trillions of records in the case of Chat GPT type models, or all of the existing data that you have available historically, and then it can use machine learning to kind of anticipate, identify patterns, and then later on, if you feed input, can use all of that knowledge that's been gained to generate output. So the prediction accuracy of the predictions is significantly higher, if it's properly trained with the right data. You can improve your production velocity. So you may be able to produce a product faster. It's constantly attentive. So if you have I'm thinking here primarily about quality assurance tasks. So if you have an employee who's, doing some quality control check, and, they get distracted for a few minutes, you can have product running by that's not necessarily checked, whereas it's always going to be checked if there's AI running. And you're going to want to improve your resource utilization. There's other areas as well, but this gives you a kind of a high-level taste of, 4 major areas where you can really see significant ROI from using AI. So now I'm going to talk about some specific use cases, and then we'll do some case studies. So we'll talk about some of the cases where AI has been applied. Okay, so demand forecasting. So this is one area you can currently, like our production system prior to AI, looks at sales, inventory thresholds, existing inventory, that sort of thing, to come up with some sort of forecasting that can be used to forecast production. You can add additional information, even from non-structured data, or unexpected shocks to the economy, things like that, that otherwise you might not be able to incorporate. Supply chain optimization, also a little bit of a two-edged sword. This, with better demand forecast, you can also have better just-in-time inventory, procurement, for example. So you can order only what you need from your suppliers, in a more kind of targeted way, but we also have to consider kind of what the rest of the supply chain looks like. Like, for example, we have customers who make prepared foods that include salads, and to have very targeted forecasting for their lettuce requirements is really great. But we also have vertical farming operations that make lettuce, and it takes them 18 weeks to produce the lettuce because they have to grow it, right? So there's limits to the flexibility of the supply chain. So it's not always quite as good as that might look like. Energy consumption prediction, one of the case studies I'll talk about shows how that kind of works out. Price trend forecasting. So that's kind of an interesting one as well, where you can perhaps get a better indication of what both the competitive prices and the consumer market might be looking like. And then product development forecasting too. So one of the case studies I wanted to talk about is a company called Snowcap, who's one of our clients. And one of the things, this is an ongoing project, or recently started project really, that we're doing for them, which is pallet design. So this is a major Canadian retailer, sorry, not retailer, but distributor, who ships out about 1,500 shipments a day, and they ship out trucks to all sorts of different routes, and the trucks have mixed orders for different customers, and they have multiple pallets on also, which may be mixed for different customers. So currently what they do is that they have they get all their orders, they lay them out in a big table, and they have this guy that's like a savant that comes into the room, spends 3 to 6 hours kind of rearranging all the orders until he gets to the right kind of sequence magically, and then they load the pallets based on his recommendations. And that's obviously not very sustainable, not very scalable. So they've got a routing software, a system, one of our partners that we're working with, we have an integration with, who's doing the routing for them. And then we're doing the pallet design based on AI. So we'll determine, look at various parameters like the weight of the item, the fragility of the item, the delivery order, how high can the pallets be? What are the dimensions constraints of the truck? What is the weight limits, temperature constraints, because you've got frozen and refrigerated and dry products all together. You have to consider all of those and then come up with a pallet design. So you tell the pickers to load the pallet exactly. And then, maybe someday we'll have robots loading the pallets. So another kind of use case we want to talk about is profitability. So, how can you make more money from AI, which is obviously everybody's goal. And one of the case studies we came across, and by the way, just as a side note, like finding case studies that are not just pilot projects or not proposed, but actually in production is not quite as easy as one might think. There's a lot of pieces of the kind of puzzle that are being put together, but it's not always a complete enough picture to go into production. And I'll explain why I think that might be a little bit later on. But this company, Kerala, actually came up with a system that they have a partner on the AI side, IntelliLabs, Indian company, I believe. Previously, their employees were going out to farmers and then analyzing the cardamom manually, and then grading, each bin and coming up with some sort of classification, which leads to a certain price. And instead of that, now they can just snap a picture with their mobile phone. They send it up to the cloud, so that's cloud AI as opposed to edge AI. And in 45 to 55 seconds, they get a result back that tells them exactly what the quality of that particular grade was, which saves them an enormous amount of time and money. So there's quite a lot of opportunity also in food safety and quality control. The main areas there where you may want to use AI is in the contamination prevention piece. So how to stop contamination from occurring. So this would be biological, chemical, physical contamination, radiological, automated visual inspections. I was just at a in the United States last week, where I saw 5 people working on the same packaging machine, and one was operating the machine, and the other 4 were doing visual inspections, all of which could be replaced by edge AI devices. Predictive hazard identification, so being able to kind of determine in advance what hazards there might be. And this is actually something that we do already. So you can enter in a raw material, and the system will suggest to you what sort of biological, chemical, physical, radiological hazards might be associated with that. And then once you identify them, and you need to, again, humans need to vet AI at this point in time. So once you identify what those hazards are, you can enter them as hazards and then use our hazard control mechanisms to come up with your hazard controls. Automated reporting. So this is a good one because typically what we do is we'll send out automated reports on a scheduled kind of basis, and we also send out alerts when events occur that are outside some sort of boundary. But having reports that go out to you specifically when you need to see them, based on AI, is something that could be very useful for people. Defect detection, so that packaging line I was talking about before, they were looking at the sealing of the package. There was a product where there needs to be a hot dog sticking outside of a pastry, and to be able to measure exactly how far out that hot dog is, not too far, not too little. That the kind of defect detection that can be easily hard-coded into an edge AI device and replace an individual. So a case study kind of on the QA side. This is an interesting one where right now, if you're going to do swab tests, everybody needs to do swab tests. So what you do is you swab the food contact or adjacent surfaces, you put it in a bag. You may have your own lab. You may not have a lab. So you have to send it out to a third party, and then 2-3 days later, you hear kind of what the result is. With this, what you're doing is using light scattering through a laser, and essentially being able to detect pathogenic bacteria on the work surface without a swab required. And there has been a successful implementation of this where they've achieved accuracies between 80 and 100%. Anybody who's interested in finding the study is welcome to reach out, and we'll give them the reference. But this can lead to a significant savings in time and cost compared to traditional methods. It's also an interesting one because we actually did this same project in collaboration with the University of British Columbia, or maybe the other way around. The University of British Columbia did it in collaboration with us, and also the Industrial Research Council of Canada, also around the same time frame, 2019. Our project did not succeed, unfortunately. We were actually able to get it to the point where we could identify the bacteria, but we didn't have enough resolution to be able to determine the species. So that was the showstopper for us. But apparently somebody else has succeeded, so good on them. A couple of places where we use AI is in the development of SOPs. So when you're creating an SOP for each section of the SOP, you can use a chat model to suggest to you what the text should be. And that saves you an enormous amount of time. Again, I'm going to caution you one last time here that, you need to vet whatever the AI tells you, because they do hallucinate. But it definitely saves an enormous amount of time because you're just doing editing as opposed to trying to figure out how to do things from scratch. Another thing that we do is hazard identification. So as I mentioned, you can put in that raw material. It'll give you a description of exactly what hazards are typically found in that type of product, and then you can choose whether or not you want to incorporate them into the hazard section, which is on the right-hand side adjacent to the AI assist box there. Optimizing production is another use case, and you can, the main one that people think about in terms of optimizing production is equipment automation and robotics, of course, which is advancing in leaps and bounds. I saw a very cool video yesterday of a food-related robot, essentially, that you could speak to because it's chat enabled, and it can respond in quite convincing natural language, and it has significant dexterity as well. 5 fingers with 3 joints, so really quite a functional piece of equipment. I wouldn't say quite ready for prime time, but getting pretty darn close. Personal product customization. This is hyped quite a lot in AI. Being able to design products for particular individuals. Not quite as big of a believer in that one. I'm not sure how much people are willing to pay for product customization. Do you really want to have cookies with exactly your own logo on them. Yeah, maybe once in a while if it's a company trade show or something, but it's not something that you're going to decide to have a different colorful cookie decoration every Friday night. So I don't think it has mass appeal, but I could be wrong. Wrong before. Real-time monitoring with sensors. So this is a huge one because a lot of times, when your production line is running, all of a sudden the registration of your film is off or something like that, and then pretty soon you got a whole bad batch of products that need to be repackaged or remade or discarded. So it's a massive one. Automated material handling. It's kind of a hard problem to solve. There's a lot of people working on that. Google is most notable for that. They have all sorts of logistics and material handling. I have seen it in successful implementation. Interestingly, not by a big tech company, but by a small company that decided to build their own robots on rails, and they used it and it works quite well. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for that. And in terms of optimizing production, one of the case studies that we came across that worked out really well was a US based cheese manufacturer who used machine learning models. And it took, in about 6 months, the AI learned, kind of all of the historical data. And then it was able to process 29 different variables, looking at the amount of starter culture, mixing times, the raw milk composition. And it came up with a suggestion for how to optimize the final moisture content. And as a result, the manufacturer was able to reliably increase the average moisture content by a whopping 0.6%, which is obviously didn't seem very impressive when I first read that number, being so small. However, that corresponds in their case to $1 million a year in extra revenue because they sell their cheese by the pound. So good on them. Another major area where AI is going to be applied is in maintenance. So you can do a lot of things with maintenance. You can do predictive maintenance for equipment. You can, and that's a big one because, in cities, for example, when they need to do maintenance on light bulbs on the street lights, they typically just have a regular schedule and they'll just go down the street and they replace every light. Whereas if you could be very, with the smart city initiatives already, people are using AI to kind of predict which lights are going to fail when. They still go out and do a big round, but they don't have to change every light. Because if they have a reasonable degree of certainty that those, the majority of the lights won't fail within a month, if they run around once a month, then they don't have to replace all the bulbs, so they can save an enormous amount of money. The same is true in a production facility. If you know when your parts are going to fail, you can both make sure that you replace only and also before they fail, so that you don't interrupt production. Training and support for maintenance staff. So think of chatting to a maintenance AI that can give you answers to your maintenance questions. Root cause analysis, so to be able to analyze data to figure out where the problems were caused in the first place that resulted in some sort of deviation, nonconformity, equipment failure. Optimizing maintenance schedules. In a past life, I did software for the medical industry, and to try to get all the doctors and nurses and technicians and equipment and patients into the right room at the right time was a major problem. So being able to have AI that helps you optimize the maintenance schedules, based on your available workers and their relative skill sets is a huge advantage. Enhanced safety monitoring. So being able to, can have sensors, for example, that can detect when employees maybe enter an area that's unsafe and send off some kind of warning is something that could be quite helpful. So another case study in this is a company called Tetra Pak Services that published in a peer-reviewed journal about a study that they did where they actually were able to predict specific equipment issues and downtimes within their case a near 100% success rate using AI and cloud-based training. with some collaboration from human apps. And that enabled them to fix maintenance intervals partially with database predictions from sensors by measuring temperature and vibration profiles. In another past life, I had a production facility and we had a machine that was malfunctioning, and it was related. We didn't know what part of the machine was malfunctioning, so we hired a company to come in who set up vibration probes on our machine and managed to use the frequency of the noise that it was making to figure out which component had failed, and then we replaced it. Just cost us a couple $1,000s. You could probably put a $20 sensor on the machine and accomplish the same thing today. Another place where you can use AI is in product design. So taste and flavor optimization, uh, texture and appearance analysis. To give you a little bit of a capability of some of the AI in terms of product design and kind of anticipating what things might be like. I mean, there's a lot of talk about protein advancements in the medical industry. In the pharmaceutical industry, there was a company that um, spent about 6 hours looking for harmful toxins, and they identified multiple different chemical warfare agents in just a 6 hour period based on their AI model, which is a good example of where AI should not be used, but it was an interesting experiment and did highlight the risks and how we need to be able to control that. But using it in a positive way to enhance our taste and flavor and textures and appearance of our product is not a bad idea. And also nutrition. So we might be able to optimize the nutritional content of our product. Think about nutritious, fantastically nutritious junk food. What kid wouldn't like? Um, consumer insights and trend predictions are another area that you may be able to use AI in. So a case study there is a beverage company. Funny, I looked quite extensively and couldn't find the name of it, but it was published in a peer-reviewed journal. Same idea. If you want it, I'll have to send it over to you. Didn't name the company, but they essentially developed a tasty lemonade product. And their objective was to use less sugar than traditional lemonade. So they were able to come up with something that had only 5 grams of sugar per 100 milliliters, which didn't seem to me to be that low in sugar. I think 5 grams is about a teaspoon, but apparently that's quite good in that industry. And the interesting thing from my perspective was that they saved about roughly 1/3 on their development costs. So their product development is they're seeing a 1/3 savings on that from introducing AI. And the reason was because the AI can analyze different ingredient interactions and processing conditions and assimilate consumer taste preferences in order to optimize the recipes. So a case study here's use cases in terms of sustainability. So sustainability is a big buzzword. I was at a trade show last month where everybody was talking about trade shows, government, banks, all the food companies that were there. That one was in Australia, and sustainability was definitely the flavor of the day. So efficient resource optimization is one of the things that you can do. Reducing waste and waste management. Sustainable packaging solutions. And I actually saw an example of that while I was there, where they had a biodegradable plastic that was quite impressive, really almost looked like real plastic, both in terms of shrink wrap and also things like plastic utensils that were biodegradable. Reduced energy consumption. So if you can track your energy as an input and you can forecast it, just being able to do things as simple as looking at the variance between the actual consumption and your theoretical consumption with an AI assist can help you conserve energy. And greenhouse gas emissions as well. So if you know what your incoming carbon footprint is, or your greenhouse gas profiles of your raw materials, you can forecast what your finished products are going to be. And an example there is a refrigeration company that used AI, and they applied it across 39 locations, about 100 different systems, around between a quarter and 10 horsepower. They were able to generate energy savings of 13 to 27% roughly, and basically showed really that they could reduce their maintenance costs and at the same time improve their energy efficiency, um, especially compared to HVAC systems, which I thought was quite interesting because I have also had some experience with HVAC savings, and that kind of 26% is pretty good compared to traditional HVAC approaches. Um, and their return on investment was over 40%, so not too bad. So it kind of brings me to the end of the period where we're talking about the various use cases and the case studies, and now I want to turn a little bit kind of to the future and how to implement it. So first of all, I want to talk a little bit about the negatives. So what's going to happen uh, in terms of the downsides, and what do you need to be careful and watch out for? So I think the number one thing that people are I think justifiably concerned about is job displacement. I think as employers, we're going to have to be sensitive to what's going to happen to workers. We're going to have to definitely help them shift skills. And I don't think it should be all on the food manufacturers. I think government and others are going to definitely educational systems are going to have to step up to the plate in this regard as well, because there will be quite a few changes. We do in many parts of the world see demographics where we have a declining workforce. So we may not be displacing as many people as in other areas. And I think the skill shifts, job displacements and skill shifts in probably North America are going to be, higher maybe than in other parts of the world, just due to the fact that we have a little bit healthier demographics, uh, both in terms of fertility rates, particularly in Mexico and the United States, combined with immigration. Whereas in places like Europe or China, others like that, where they have massive declines in demographics, you're going to see that's going to be less of an issue. And in places like Japan, they're already using automation to do things, even like work in hospitals to put patients over in beds and things like that. So it's going to be a lifesaver for those types of you know economies that are really aging quite rapidly with very few young people replacing them. And these are all going to cause lots of social implications. And if it's not managed, it could be social unrest as well that would result from that. So we really need to be careful and sensitive to what's going to happen to workers. But on the bright side, there's a lot of good things that come out of this as well. And I think on balance, as long as it's properly managed, uh, it's going to be more good than bad. We're going to first of all have the creation of entirely new categories of jobs, some of which we probably can't even imagine today. But we're definitely going to reduce a lot of. We're going to eliminate a lot of jobs, but there's going to be kind of new jobs that are going to be made possible because of that. Interestingly, they thought that originally that it was going to be more of the manual labor jobs and not so many creative jobs that are going to be displaced. But I think technologies like DALL-E have kind of disabused us of that notion. There's going to be a lot more economic efficiencies, which should be more efficient resource utilization, more abundance for all, right? And we're going to have an opportunity for collaborative roles. I think a lot of us that are using AI, even at just the ChatGPT kind of level at the moment, or Microsoft Bard, you find that working with an AI actually is a kind of a satisfying experience because it increases your productivity, and everybody likes to be more productive. You can also do more, and hopefully at the end of the rainbow here, we'll have more leisure time. Everybody will be able to take some more time off. There's not a lot of things that I agree with Bernie Sanders on, but his notion that he recently proposed about a shorter work week might not be such a bad idea, as AI really takes hold and we see the benefits flowing from that. So in terms of managing the transition from AI, there's going to be new skills required. So the question there is, do you want to uh, develop your own in-house, or do you want to outsource it? And some of the skills that are going to be required are going to be like data science and analytics, AI and machine learning engineering, robotics and automation engineering, operational technologies and security. Uh, Software development still going to be required. System integrations are going to be huge, as I mentioned before. I think we're going to see a lot more integrations than we've had up to this point. Change management and change training. I think about 60% of any technology change is actually not related to the cost of the technology. It's related to the cost of the change management with respect to moving the existing workforce from where they were to where they need to be. And I don't see that changing. If anything, it may go up from there, but 60% I think is a pretty good kind of benchmark there. Regulatory compliance and ethics. So there's going to have to be more regulatory compliance. There's going to be probably ethical constraints put on you, maybe about laying off workers and that sort of thing. Strategic planning and project development. So this is going to have to be rolled out carefully and in kind of in a cohesive way, if possible. If you're going to maximize your benefit from it, you got to really plan it carefully. And there's going to have to be a lot of interdisciplinary communication, maybe between departments that really haven't, have sort of worked autonomously in the past. So there's also the possibility, like some may say, okay, look, we're doing okay. We don't need any AI. And, you may be right, depending on your particular industry. But you do have to be aware of the loss of market share. So a lot of companies today in the food industry have very skinny margins. The average in North America margin for a food company is under 3%. So that's pretty low. And as long as everybody else is also operating on a level sort of playing field, that's not so bad. But if your competitors end up becoming much more efficient than you, it's a pretty short step from that 3% margin to going underwater. So you have to definitely, consider whether your industry and your competitors are, kind of overtaking you in that regard or not, because you don't want to lose the market share and you don't want to lose your margins, right? So there's different risks for different sectors. So the main ones that I think are at risk are going to be processed food manufacturers, agriculture and raw material production, meat and alternative proteins, and fast food. There's some remarkable work on the fast food side. I think McDonald's had a pilot project where they had no humans inside the facility at all in a demonstration store that they set up. So, not only were there workers entirely automated, but they had some big advantages in terms of food safety and product quality as well, because no human hands touch anything. It's a no risk of that type of contamination. And, your onions get sliced, 12 milliseconds before it goes out the drive-through window. So, you could have very high levels of freshness. Some sectors are going to be uh, fairly insulated from the effects of AI. Artisan and craft foods. I would say things like, breweries and distilleries. Uh, like there's different types. So if they're, mass market stuff, that's true. But, the highly sought after, artisan beers and that type of thing, cheeses, these craft foods are going to still happen. Very high-end consumer products are probably going to, maintain their cachet and are not going to suffer too much. The final one that's probably sort of insulated is like, think about farmers markets. So if you're making, artisan products and selling at the farmers market, I think you're going to be okay. Anybody that's in the mass market space is really going to be suffer a bit though. So what are your next steps? So if you take only one thing away from my talk today, it is start collecting your data digitally now. And think about it this way. Every time you write a letter on a piece of paper, that is an opportunity lost. So it doesn't matter kind of how you really collect it. If you use a sophisticated system like ours, or if you even just use Excel, for the time being or whatever, start collecting all your data, because you're going to need to data mine that data and use that to train your AI going forward. So start collecting data. Understand the challenges that you're going to be facing. So, kind of need to get some education in 10 seminars like this one. Set clear objectives. So, get an idea about kind of where you want to start, what the low hanging fruit might be, what the opportunities are, maybe get an assessment done of your facility and your processes, and then set objectives based on those. I started sort of telling you before that there's different skills required. So, if you're a big company and you have a 2 billion R&D budget, you may want to do it all in-house. If not, you might want to partner with somebody else who already has AI expertise. And start really thinking about how to move your workforce forward in this regard. So get the culture ready in advance, if possible, for AI. And in terms of what we're looking for, ultimately, fully autonomous food production is something that I think is possible someday. Seems a bit far-fetched, but let me point out that 25 years ago, I saw a construction project, manufacturing facility, where there were only 3 people working on a shift. One shoveling raw material in one end, one with a forklift taking finished product at the other end, and one guy up in the control room controlling, all the processes. So food products, there's a lot more complexity involved. The technical obstacles are still substantial. We're still a long ways out, but I think ultimately we may get there. So, I'm just inviting everybody who may want to collaborate with us to, reach out if you'd like to, work with us in the future. You can kind of get into the ground floor and help us. We usually collaborate with our clients to sort of advance our technology in collaboration with our customers, which those advances become available to the rest of the community. So it's kind of a nice community sort of environment in that regard. You can, see your ROI in 1 year. Our solution is specifically designed for food manufacturers. It's extremely complete. Almost every aspect of food production is run through our system. And, you're going to be able to digitize everything, track everything, and everything is unified in really one central database, one source of the truth. And that's, I think, why we've been successful at implementing AI, because we have all of this data and it's all interconnected. So for us to use AI as we've done so far already is a very short step, because we don't have to build all the other underlying infrastructure to gather the data and assemble the data and the user interfaces and all of that. It's already there. So very easy for us to move forward on that. Anyway, how are we doing for time, Amanda?
We have about 5 minutes, so we have time for a couple of questions, if that works for you.
Yep, perfect. Let's do that.
Wonderful. So the first one would be for a food and beverage company just getting started with AI, where would the best place to start be?
I would say start with an assessment. So have somebody knowledgeable in the art come and have a look at the facility and give you some pointers in terms of where you could see the biggest bang for your buck in terms of the application of AI. The other thing that I would do is I would definitely, as I mentioned before, start collecting your digital data yesterday if possible.
Absolutely. A next one we have is, in what areas can AI contribute the most to a company's bottom line?
I think definitely on the quality control side and production. Those are going to be the two major ones. The production side, because you can reduce so much labor, at the same time improving your quality and your throughput, and in many cases even your velocity. So that's a low-hanging fruit. On the quality control side, again, you're improving your quality, but you're also mitigating the risk of an outbreak of foodborne illness. And I know a lot of people don't really worry or don't believe that that's going to happen to them, but we've seen that happen to other companies. We have, I know I was brought in after the fact for a company where they killed people. That's an extinction level event for the company. So definitely don't let it get there. And having this constant attentive AI, very high level of quality assurance is helpful for sure.
Wonderful. Looks like we have time for another one. How can AI be used for inventory management?
Inventory management itself, like tracking your inventory transactions, is more of a ledger kind of software problem than AI problem. But other aspects like the procurement side, like getting the inventory in the first place, definitely AI can play a lot there. Determining how to optimize the storage ability, how it's reducing. Like, for example, we have a client who we built interface for where they were able to reduce the picking time that was required by 6 seconds per pick because we could provide optimal routing for each order through the warehouse. And that saved them $85,000 a year, just that 6 seconds per pick. So lots routing and optimization in general.
Wonderful. And it looks like that's all the time we have for today. So thank you, Steven, for your wonderful presentation. And please keep an eye on your inbox for a copy of the recording. And everyone have a wonderful rest of your day.